Hi, thanks for tuning in to Everything Catholic again. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And I'm sure you know by now that I'm focusing on the many saints in the church on this channel. And I have also been sharing a lot of clips of Father Joseph Iannuzzi on this channel, so I hope all of you have learned a lot from listening to him. Now for this video, on the other hand, the clip of Father Iannuzzi, here we'll talk a little bit about Judas, hell, and grace. So let's start with this one. Listen to this.
Consider Judas Iscariot and Christ, whom Christ chose. Jesus wanted Judas to be saved. Jesus wants all to be saved. He redeemed not most of mankind. He redeemed all mankind. But not all choose to be saved. There's a difference, therefore, between redemption and salvation. So in the fiat of redemption, Jesus redeemed the entire human race. That is, from Adam to the last human that will be conceived. That's redemption. That means he gave us the grace to do all of our thoughts, words, and actions without sin. From the moment we're conceived, we're given this treasure trove of grace purchased by the blood of Christ. We can ignore that, discard it, abuse it, not use it. But that free choice of availing or not ourselves of this treasure trove of grace purchased by the blood of Christ, which is the fiat of redemption, is up to our free will. Judas chose not to use that, you see. He used it in part, but in the end he failed to, and that cost him. So this does not indicate that Christ did not reorder all of mankind's interior simply because Judas was lost or others are lost. Now, why do I say Judas was lost when the Church does not teach that? In the writings of the mystics that bear the Church's seals of approval, namely the Nihil Obstat and Imprimatur, it is the consistent teachings of the mystics except one or two, and they are vague on this area, that Judas was lost. Now, let's suppose that that's debatable. The court is out, the jury is out on that. All right. Consider that others were lost by virtue of the vision of Fatima, where the Blessed Mother opened the earth and showed to the little shepherd children, Jacinta, Francisco, and Lucia, hell, and they described it as such. They said there was fire, and there were humans walking through the fire, and once they passed through this fire, they were transformed into hideous, ugly beasts. That represents the state of their soul, which is eternal despair, eternal hopelessness, eternal fire. Or consider the writings of the mystic Saint Faustina Kowalska, also approved by Cardinal Wojtyła, who would become Pope John Paul II, and bear the Church's present-day Imprimatur and Nihil Obstat seals of approval. In these writings approved by the Church, Faustina describes souls in hell she knew while on earth. She was taken to hell, and describes 9 torments of the damned that do not ever cease. And she said that what surprised her most of her visit to hell with Jesus, who wanted to show her the importance of her redemptive sacrifices so that she could save souls from going to hell, what surprised her the most was that most souls in hell did not believe hell existed. These are her words. Okay. So, just because a soul goes to hell does not mean that Jesus did not reorder that person's soul, their interior. He did. But during their lifetime, after they were conceived and given this treasure trove of redemptive grace, whereby they could, with their good will, do all their thoughts, words, and actions without sinning, under the action of God's grace, they chose instead to abuse or not use that treasure trove of redemptive grace, you see.
Now in that clip we've just listened to, Father Iannuzzi touched quite a bit on grace. So that is why I decided to include this clip in the video as well, and it's going to be more about grace. I hope you'll find this one helpful. Listen to this.
Grace is God's divine assistance to us, as baptized infants, as mature adults, as spiritually mature saints, and as recipients of the same interior state of union with the will of God, as the angels and saints in heaven. Even though this is one grace from God, it assumes various applications. So God's one grace can take away evil, that's called justifying grace. Another application can give you that which God has. sort of like a personification of his wisdom, power, and clemency, known as faith, hope, and love. So at baptism, when a child is baptized or an adult, these two graces meet them. It's one grace, I should say, but with two applications. So the first is God's sanctifying grace that comes into the soul and infuses within it faith, hope, and love. But at the same time, on account of the admission of that triune power, wisdom, clemency, of the three divine persons, there is expelled original sin. That's justifying grace. So we receive sanctifying grace that infuses God, and justifying grace that expels evil from us. That's the moment of baptism. But the grace of God continues to assume various applications throughout life. For example, actual grace. These are interventions that God sends us to our aid, comes to our aid in time of need throughout life. Or habitual or operating grace that is always present with us and assists us. And then we have natural grace, right? That sustains everything around us, which does the will of God perfectly. As God tells Luisa Picareta, the sun perfectly obeys the will of God. So does the moon and the waters that don't go beyond their limits. Everything has its own confines, limitations, and purpose to serve us as the crown of creation. And then there is supernatural grace, which I, elucidated on earlier, which includes all the grace from above to us, from sanctifying to justifying to actual, to cooperating to habitual, to even sacramental grace, which accompanies all the sacraments, or efficacious grace, and so on.
Well then, that will be all for the video this time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, and hopefully all of you have learned so much from this video. And remember, if ever you have any feedback or suggestion, please let us know in the comments below. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your continuous support, contributions, and prayers. And until the next one, thanks again for watching, and may God bless you.
The Ascension took place on Mount Olivet, at the base of which is Bethany. So Christ led his apostles out through Bethany, which meant passing through Jerusalem, on the very spot where he wept over Jerusalem. They had to pass through the Garden of Gethsemane. And what a reminder they had when they saw in that garden the twisted olive trees crimsoned with his blood, reminding them of his divine power that they had forfeited momentarily when they left his presence. Especially Peter, the Pope, was not yet Pope. Peter did not receive the office of papacy until at the shore where Christ asked him, 3 times, do you love me? And the reason is simple. Christ was the supreme pontiff. It was not until he died and resurrected and ascended, resurrected, that Christ conferred to Peter the keys of the kingdom in actuality. They were given to him in potency in Matthew 16. But when he appeared to them at the lake, at the shore of the lake, and then asked Peter to make up for the 3 times he betrayed him with 3 I love yous, that's when he conferred to him the office of the papacy. Feed my lambs, feed my sheep. Well, Jesus had the disciples cross through Jerusalem, through Gethsemane. And in ascending there at Bethany, the Savior did not lay aside his humanity, his garment of flesh with which he was clothed. The resurrection sublimated, transformed this humanity that remained the same substance of the person of Christ. And the same applies to us at the general judgment. We will remain the same person we are today, but our humanities will be perfected without losing our human nature, just like Christ in Revelation chapter 5 still bears in heaven the marks of slaughter in his hands, feet, and side. The Ascension put all doubts away that this is truly God by introducing his human nature into intimate and eternal communion with heaven. If Jesus had remained on earth after rising from the dead for 40 days before ascending, the purpose of this was the faith of his disciples would have still been focused on his life of this world rather than that of heaven. And this is partially the reason why he transformed himself before Peter, James, and John, before the scandal of the cross, so that their faith would not be shaken in such a way that they would shift their focus from heaven to earth and only desolation and the cross and death. And he only chose these 3 because they had the faith to understand when he would resurrect the mystery of this transfiguration. Only a few moments before Christ ascended into heaven, his disciples were still asking him, Lord, are you going to restore the rule of the Israel now? This is found in Acts 1:6. So Jesus had to draw their mind beyond the focus of this world. And he would do so precisely by leaving this world and ascending into the next in front of them. Now, what's interesting is that Mary reveals that when Christ ascended into heaven, he did not do so alone. He did so with this heavenly host that was awaiting his resurrection in limbo. We're talking about millions and millions of souls ascending visibly with him before those that watched as he literally ascended in the flesh with the others. Whether a purely solar body is debatable, we don't know. And the same debate is applicable to the souls that, as Acts also relates, rose out of their graves to testify to Christ's resurrection when the earth had shaken at the moment of his crucifixion. Many tombs were open, Acts relates, and the bodies came forth and they testified. Well, did those bodies also go to heaven at the moment of the ascension with Christ? Or did just their souls go? We don't know the answer to that with certainty. But what we do know with certainty is that two bodies are in heaven, that of Christ and Mary. Christ ascended, Mary was assumed by Christ's power. What about Enoch and Elijah, who were taken up? Well, we know they didn't go to heaven because the gates of heaven were not open before Christ resurrected. According to the approved writings of Anne Catherine Emmerich, they were taken to a place called the Mountain of the Prophets. Now, whether they're taken there to come back and testify as reported in Revelation, where these two witnesses come back, well, some say Moses, Enoch, some say Elijah, some say others. Some say the Sacred and Immaculate Heart, the Spirit of Prophecy. But in any event, Christ had to take the minds of the apostles off of the earth and direct it toward heaven. Remember, in heaven, faith will be perfected because the followers of Christ, will see him literally. Hope will be perfected because we will possess him literally. And love will be perfected because we will be completely consumed in his divine will, which is love itself.